cozy on a couch, my body mister, come figure it out with the Sonnet Sisters.
Neighbours, Godspeed! Welcome to Sonnet Sisters. My name is Anna, and this week we are doing things slightly differently. From now on, we're going to be making 2 videos a week instead of 3, so you won't have to listen to our slow, uninformed, confused first impressions videos anymore. I will be doing a reading of Sonnet 15 today, but for full transparency, before the filming I have read and studied the poem a little bit, so I have a kind of understanding of what's going on. So I'm going to start by doing a straight reading of the sonnet, then I'm going to go through a translation into modern English of the meaning behind the sonnet. I'll then talk a little bit about the specific words and phrases and what they mean, the structure and rhythm of the poem and how this influences how we interpret it, the tone and the imagery.
What is the meaning of this?
When I consider everything that grows, holds in perfection but a little moment, that this huge stage presenteth naught but shows, whereon the stars in secret influence comment, when I perceive that men as plants increase, cheered and checked even by the self-same sky, vaunt in their youthful sap, at height decrease, and wear their brave state out of memory, then the conceit of this inconstant stay sets you most rich in youth before my sight, where wasteful time debateth with decay, to change your day of youth to sullied night, and all in war with time for love of you, as he takes from you, I engraft you new. So, when I first came to this sonnet, it did hit me as a bit of a brick of complexity and longer words compared to the few previous odd-numbered sonnets that I've been looking at, which were all fairly simple in terms of the number of syllables each word in the sonnet had, because it does make quite a big difference when you're loaded with quite a lot of hefty, long words. It makes it harder to say, harder to read, and it impacts on the feeling that you get from reading the sonnet. So let's look at a modern translation of Sonnet 15. When I consider that everything that lives or grows stays perfect only for a short moment, that this huge vast world is just a stage filled with spectacle and illusion, which the stars influence or devise a fate for, secretly or without explanation. When I see or understand that people grow and multiply just like plants do, nurtured and obstructed by the very same sky, so I take that to be the same sky both nurtures and obstructs, and the same sky does this both for plants and for humans. They show off when they're young and fit, and decline when they reach their peak of development, and wear down their peak so far that not even a memory of it survives. Then the thought of this short, temporary life makes you look rich with youth to me, so it makes your youth pop out even more. Where wasteful time plots with decay, so time is scheming in league with death and rot to change your youth into an ugly, worn night, as opposed to the daytime of your youth. All in war, so everybody fights against time. The whole world battles against time out of their love for you. The whole world is working out of love for you. While time takes life from you, I attempt to replenish you, brackets, with my poetry. So a familiar theme appearing here, which is the ravages of time and beauty in youth, beauty as transient, life as transient and a gift that one should use, pressure being put on somebody who's beautiful to do something about this beauty and about this transience. Yes, correct, this is a Fair Lord sonnet, and it's very close to the end, thank goodness. Fun fact about Sonnet 15 is that it kind of links with Sonnet 16, and the reason this sonnet is perhaps a little bit hard to get into from a first reading is that it's not quite complete, and Shakespeare doesn't quite get his full message across in just Sonnet 15. You kind of have to read both together. And in fact, when you look at the start of Sonnet 16, which Jennifer will go into more detail on, It starts with but. It is directly leading on from the end of Sonnet 15, and the sentiment does directly change with that but. It goes into the but this is the flip side of this situation. Now, let's look at some of these specific words and phrasing. Comment is the first word I found really interesting, which is said in the notes of the text to be derived from the Latin commentare, which is said to mean invent or devise a fate. I will come back to this word because it does something really interesting with verbs and nouns, as does one other word in this sonnet, and I really like that kind of verb-noun messery that Shakespeare uses. So juicy. The next word that is sort of outdated or has been evolved to mean something different now, or its usage at least has evolved to mean something different, is increase, which we have encountered before in the sonnets up to now. So increase here means to grow or to reproduce or to multiply. Checked and cheered are fairly clear when you take the line as a whole. Cheered means encouraged and checked means obstructed. So you can kind of play with the synonyms of those words, but it kind of means things that are nourished and also checked, halted, stopped. Vaunt, which is a great fun word to say, means to boast or exult. Height is an interesting one because it just means peak, which is kind of the same, but there are so many interesting ways that synonyms work in English to imply various things that are perhaps more or less fitting in each context. And so this just means once somebody reaches their height or their peak, so peak could mean, metaphorical peak of their life. Once they've reached that, they will start to decline. Decrease means to decay or to rot or to decline. Brave state, which is a lovely phrase, just means youthful glory or peak again. Conceit, which has evolved to mean something slightly different or to be commonly used to mean something slightly different, here means a thought or concept or a notion, not vanity or self-love. However, vanity or self-love does work in the context of this poem because it is in alignment with earlier sonnets which match vanity with transience and death and frivolity and short-livedness. Engraft is a nice word. This means to restore something, and it's got its roots, if you'll pardon the pun, in horticultural practice. There is a practice of inserting roots from one tree into another to replenish life in the tree that you're inserting the roots into. It's also a pun on engrave, which is interesting because the poet is saying, I'm replenishing you, or I'm trying to replenish you with my poetry, with my words. So to place engraving next to engrafting is nicely done. Influence is a nice word. This is the second word that plays with verb and nounery because influence is obviously a verb and it is used as a verb in this sonnet, but the notes insist that it's a noun. And that noun is, are you ready for this? Magical star juice that flows from the stars down to earth and influences human destiny. Wasteful here means ruinous, so that's quite a strong word. It's stronger than it sounds to our modern ears because we've got plenty of other words in Shakespeare language for wasteful. We've used them. We've used unthrift and other things. Wasteful means damaging, something quite powerful and really negative here. The structure of this sonnet is really interesting, and I think part of that is what makes this sonnet a little bit harder to get into without doing some background reading first. There are 3 feminine endings, so that really messes up the iambic pentameter, which is present through the rest of it. As early as line 2 we have a feminine ending, holds in perfection but a little moment, which just drops you down at the end of the line. So it is aligning this image of perfection perhaps with weakness, fragility. We know that feminine endings, and this really riles me, are named so because they are weaker. Following on this vein of feminine weakness, feminine endings, line 4 is a feminine ending. Whereon the stars in secret influence comment. I would like to read this as the poet feeling helpless against the weight of destiny and the inexplicable, uncontrollable hand of destiny, which is out of reach and perhaps unfair. There seems to be a slight tinge of unfairness, bitterness. Not really bitterness, because it's all very quite floral and pretty imagery in this sonnet, but there's a little hint of helplessness. The phrase in secret also implies that something is going on behind somebody's back. It's quite conspiratorial. It was quite dangerous. There was a lot of dangerous things having to happen in secret in Shakespeare's day, political things, and it could imply that the poet feels perhaps that the universe is cheating them somehow. Line 6 is potentially a feminine ending, depending on how it's pronounced. So we have a few words that are very odd to a modern mouth. Cheered and checked. Even or Ian by the self-same sky. So even is EV''N, suggests to me that it would be even, perhaps shortened slightly to even, but that's still two things, that's still two beats your tongue and your teeth are going over. So that's quite an awkward line, and I think it is intended to be one extra. In terms of how the structure affects the meaning, there are two potentially interesting pairings of things. So the first one is perhaps just me being incredibly childish, but we know that Shakespeare was incredibly childish sometimes too, or at least incredibly rude. The first one is grows and shows, which put me in mind of the phrase, is it a grower or a shower? I do apologise, yes, it's very rude. However, consider everything that grows holds in perfection. That's a very nice thing. This is a very nice thing being described. And then talking about the huge stage presenteth naught but shows. Shows is made out to be something less substantial, less good, less worthy, and that's kind of the meaning behind growers and showers. Everybody prefers a grower, so I hear. I'm not going to explain that for you here. If you don't know what I mean and you're over 18, go and Google, is it a grower or a shower? The next alignment or pairing with rhyme is moment and comment. So yeah, in modern pronunciation this is but a half rhyme, but I do like how it aligns or contrasts a moment, a short piece of time, with comment, which, if we're going to look at the Latin commentare, to devise a fate, that gives this impression of comment meaning fate, destiny, eternity even, so something final, something grand, epic, compared with a moment. The last pairing I picked out was in the final couplet, which is granted always going to be there. They're usually very pure, direct and straightforward in their intention, so yes, this is very much laying it out there with two things that it wants you to associate with each other. So we've got you and new. Look, you could be new. I can do this for you. Let's go back to line 4, because I want to talk about the verb noun messery. Whereon the stars in secret influence comment. So, influence comment here sounds like verb noun. They're going to influence something, which is comment. Comment is going to be influenced. However, obviously we know that comment could mean to devise a fate, so comment could be a verb here. Influence obviously also could be a noun, and knowing how Shakespeare was a bit of a Yoda sometimes and moved words around in a sentence, it could be noun verb. So whereon the stars in secret influence comment could be restructured to say whereon the stars in secret comment influence, or comment with influence. So devise a fate with this influence, this fluid from the stars. With that stuff, they make a fate for the humans. In terms of prominent imagery in this sonnet, there are two main strands. There's nature and theatre. So for nature we've got grows, stars, plants, sky, sap, decay, ingraft. For theatre, we've got stage, presenteth, shows, vaunt even, and conceit, I would argue, could be a stagely word because there are the conceits of theatre, the conceits we choose to opt into. Now let's talk about tone. This sonnet is waxing lyrical and a half. In fact, it's doing it so much that it needs a whole other sonnet to finish its point. If I were to classify this sonnet as a character from pop culture, I would call it Luna Lovegood. It's very floaty, it's very floral. For the majority of it, it's more about the universe or the general processes of time and magic and life than it is about an individual, for the majority. So it's kind of this vague, floaty, abstract idea that isn't quite sunk home, I don't think, not in Sonnet 15. It's very grand imagery, and the gesture at the end, I can try to replenish you with my words. It's kind of feeble but grand and quite romantic and poetic at the same time. I know this is a poem, of course it's poetic, but you know what I mean by poetic. It's extra poetic. So this is kind of the annoying bit of the storytelling where Sherlock starts explaining away some bit of evidence to Watson, and he's sat there going, "What are you talking about? I asked you who committed the crime." And you're thinking, what is he talking about this for? This is that bit of the poem. This whole sonnet is the exposition before Sonnet 16 kicks in and gets to the point. It gets to the save yourself mode of this procreation message. I won't go into any more detail about Sonnet 16 for now. I will allow Jennifer to do that for you next week. However, because these sonnets tie into each other, performance-wise, this might mean that we tie our performances together again. So that might mean that you're waiting a little bit for the performance of Sonnet 15. If you can possibly bear it, they will potentially be released together next week with Jennifer's analysis of Sonnet 16. So you'll have a nice full understanding of these two sonnets as a whole, and then you'll get to watch them as a nice big beautiful short together. I think that's all I will bore you with for my analysis of this sonnet. However, if you're still waiting for your tea to brew and you have a few spare minutes, it's now time to go to our very new fresh segment, Bard News. Good evening, fellows, and welcome to Bard News. This week in Bard News, Andrew Scott reprises his role of Hamlet and admits that when he first took up the role, he doubted he had the necessary qualities to play the famous Dane. We're sure he'll be incredible. Again. Follow the link below to see a delightful picture of him hiding behind a sofa. Meanwhile, across the pond in New York, Oscar Isaac takes up the Dane himself, and The Guardian didn't like it. Apparently, Oscar Isaac's, quote, perfect face and clear talent couldn't even make them warm to the role of Hamlet. I say quote, but it's actually what I believe about him as well. I'm pretty sure Oscar Isaac's immaculate face and blindingly obvious talent could make me warm to anything, although there is that filmic adaptation of Therese Requiem which we will never mention again. And finally in Bard News this week, Bill Walthall at the Shakespeare Standard does a lovely little roundup of the ways that we have previously tried to represent the most demanding stage direction our old boy Will left us to deal with, exit pursued by a bear. Previous methods include paper, silk and lightning. Follow the link below for troubling speculation on whether Bill actually used real bears. And that's all for this week in Bard News. See you next time. Until then, rest you merry. So, little familiar theme? Good.